League of Legends matches can get pretty heated, and as you and I both know, sometimes the things we say or do on the Rift can end up backfiring on us big time. But while it's one thing to flame your NT teammates in solo queue, it becomes a whole nother level of disrespect when this trash talking makes its way into the professional scene. And unfortunately for these 8 players, despite their loud words and bold claims, the results didn't exactly pan out in their favor. Also, just to clarify, this video will be avoiding any prompted or scripted moments featured in either segments or trailers, as while those do of course have their place to generate hype, it's much more fun to take a look at times which unprompted and sometimes unfiltered words ended up going wrong. Beginning our list with one of the most notoriously toxic players in the game's competitive history, we find ourselves in the LCS 2016 Spring Semifinals in a heated series between Team Liquid and CLG, two of the most storied organizations in the region's history who now found themselves pitted against one another for a coveted spot in the Grand Finals, and in the case of Team Liquid, this matchup included their now infamous jungler, Dardoch. As mentioned in my previous documentary, Dardoch's career has long been plagued by his, shall we say, confident remarks, as well as a fair amount of footage from a few years ago showing him to have some clear issues when it came to controlling his toxicity, and as if his long record of team bouncing didn't already provide enough evidence of his boldly honest character, his statement at the conclusion of this series certainly wouldn't be doing him any favors. You see, coming off the back of this incredibly close semifinals bout against CLG, which went the full distance in all 5 games, Dardoch and Team Liquid would unfortunately fall just short in their attempt at a comeback after being down 1-2 in the series, being unable to close out Game 5 and having to settle to play for 3rd place, a match that would pit this TL lineup against the loser of the following day's matchup featuring TSM and Immortals. However, even though he had had an average series in playing both Kindred and Rek'Sai, Dardoch still remained pretty confident headed into this consolation match, as in his post-game interview following this narrow loss, he spared no time in calling his shot and making his intentions clear.
Who would you actually rather face between TSM and Immortals?
I don't have a preference of TSM Immortals. We're going to smash whoever we get against, but we're not going to slow down for practice just because it's like a less valuable match or anything. We're just going to meet whoever we play against, beat them, and then move on to next split.
Now, initially, this callout didn't seem as if it would be too unreasonable, as incredibly, the series underdogs TSM somehow managed to sweep aside a previously dominant Immortals lineup in a clean 3-0, securing their slot in the finals while leaving Dardoch and Team Liquid to face off against the regular season champions in their fight for 3rd place. But while Immortals had been caught sleeping on the job in their previous series, unfortunately for the trash-talking jungler, things went a lot worse than expected, as not only did Immortals defeat Team Liquid in this series, but they did so handedly in a 3-0 sweep, with Game 2 in particular being especially awkward for Dardoch, as to put it bluntly, the jungle diff in this second matchup was huge. And while of course we still have plenty of the classic Team Liquid and LCS trash talk to come later on, headed overseas to their western counterparts, the LEC, we have one of the boldest statements made by a rookie in recent memory, who in his first season with the league was already looking to stake his claim. With Europe's favorite international representation in the Mad Lions merging with the organization KOI headed into the LEC's 2024 winter split, this newly combined MDK roster was understandably met with a fair amount of skepticism, as outside of maintaining the team's franchise jungler Elyoya, the roster replaced all of the year's previous members with 4 upcoming rookies, with one especially notable addition coming in the form of their new bot laner, Supa. During the team's opening round robin, this jokingly nicknamed roster of Elyoya and friends managed to prove that they could in fact actually be a pretty decent team, finishing in a 3-way tie for 3rd place, with Supa proving himself to be one of the better ADCs in the region. However, though their performance during the first 9 games was respectable for a team that headed into the season was met with a lot of uncertainty, when it came to Elyoya and Supa being invited onto the league's Euphoria podcast headed into the winter playoffs, there was no shortage of confidence coming from the reigning Superliga Finals MVP. And while Supa had actually made some pretty great points in regards to still remaining confident while being a rookie, such as his fire bar of being a rookie is an excuse many people put on themselves to accept failure, it was what he said in his comparison to legendary LCK ADC and world champion Def that unsurprisingly rubbed some people the wrong way.
watching, you know, I watched Def when I started in 2020. I believe I'm way better than him, so I want to play to him and prove it, you know.
Now, Supa had been good, sure, but to claim himself as better than one of the greatest, most well-respected carries in the game's history just 3 weeks into his rookie season was definitely a reach, and whether he liked it or not, it led to him being absolutely torched in comparison to the KT bot laner throughout the course of the entire year. Oh yeah, and he doubled down just a couple weeks later on his overreaching claims by stating in a separate interview that he is by far the best ADC in the LEC, and no, this is not something out of context or anything, this is just exactly what he said. But while this situation is a bit more unique compared to the rest of the list and not directly trashing his opposition, the backlash for making such statements still remained all the same, as unlike another certain ADC who believed he was by far the best in his role in Europe, this time around Supa would be unable to live up to his pretty overconfident, if not entirely deluded, expectations. With this MDK roster falling off pretty hard after their second place finish in winter, only to barely scrape their way into Worlds through season finals several months later, at best Supa had been good but still wasn't great, and after being knocked out of Worlds in an anticipated but still disappointing showing, well, he got his comeuppance as fans definitely let him hear about it. But Supa still isn't the only rookie ADC who's dished out some serious spice, as just a year prior to the LCS Spring Split in 2023, Team Liquid's rookie bot laner Yeon got a little bit ahead of himself in the heat of the moment, something that Cloud9 support Sven didn't exactly take too kindly. In a close bout featuring the first clash of these two hyped up rosters of varying success, after TL managed to find a successful skirmish despite being at a gold deficit, in the heat of the moment Yeon wrote to the retreating Cloud9 lineup that their Team Liquid Academy team would be able to beat them as well, and while this message in of itself was never mentioned or shown on stream, this flame became public information not too long after, as awkwardly for this rookie talent, Cloud9 would eventually go on to claim victory in this match, and also in the heat of the moment, Sven publicly showed his lack of appreciation and being disrespected after the game.
Oh man!
The cold handshake.
Oh, what the heck is actually going on?
Okay, an interview actually.
Something actually must have happened. Holy moly.
Being one of the game's most veteran ADCs now slotted in for Cloud9's support role, Sven clearly didn't appreciate being talked down to by a new up-and-comer who had still yet to fully prove himself so early into the year, and as stated by C9 Fudge in an interview shortly afterwards, it was revealed that Sven had told Yeon to simply go back to Academy. Now, unlike the rest of this list, this story did actually have a pretty wholesome ending to it, as in a really well-made LCS content piece just over a year later, both Sven and Yeon sat down to have a laugh about the situation as finally Yeon got his shake. But there seems to be a trend in LCS Rookie of the Year winners having their trash talk accidentally bite back, since just a year prior, Evil Geniuses unexpectedly brought forth one of the best North American bred talents in years, in dominant mid laner and prominent trash talker Jojo Pune. While today JoJo is making headlines and being the first ever North American born player to be imported into Europe, fittingly enough joining alongside Koi and their aforementioned ADC Supa, even in his debut in pro play he showed that he was bold off the bat, throwing shade at NA legend Bjergsen after defeating Team Liquid one time in the LCS Lock-Ins group stage before swiftly eating his words and being stomped out by the 6-time regional champion in a 3-0 sweep in the finals. However, while one would imagine that experiencing such a massive humbling would really sink in for this rookie mid laner, especially considering that Evil Geniuses finished just middle of the pack with a 9-9 record at the end of the regular season, things really began to ramp up for both JoJo and the team as they headed into the playoffs, as after dropping into the losers bracket coming off of a narrow 5-game loss to who else but Team Liquid, the team only dropped a single game against FlyQuest in the next round before pulling out an insane run to go undefeated and eventually win the LCS 2022 Spring Split. Thanks in part to their immensely talented rookies in both JoJo and Danny, this revitalized EG lineup was more than ready to square off against their Western counterparts in G2 heading into MSI, and JoJo made sure to let everyone know about it.
You earned the right to represent North America on the international stage at MSI. I know that you've got a lot of confidence in the way you play. That's another echelon. Where's your mind at? What are you thinking?
I mean, I saw the MSI bracket. We're against EU, so I mean, I think we're gonna shit on EU, but we'll have to see.
Now, these were some pretty bold choice words, but luckily for JoJo and EG, they would play the equally hot streaking revitalized G2 roster 4 times in the group stage and twice in the Rumble phase, so JoJo had plenty of chances to embarrass the European representatives. But not only was JoJo unable to keep up with Caps in the dominant fashion that he promised, he actually managed to not win a single game, with this EG lineup awkwardly being handed 6 losses straight from the LEC's first seed, once again proving that the kryptonite to a rookie JoJo Pune's trash-talking confidence was actually just a competent and experienced Danish mid laner. And while JoJo has, for the time being, parted from his North American trash talk throne, filling his place as a rightful successor is Team Liquid's current mid laner who defined the North American scene through his insane trash talking game, a style that belongs to who else but APA. While there are of course a wide plethora of instances in which his trash talk has ultimately fallen short compared to the expectations they set, there is one recent instance in particular that stands out as unique compared to the rest, interestingly enough involving top esports mid laner Cream and their jungler Tion. Now, admittedly, it was really difficult for me to find any LCK or LPL trash talk that was neither scripted or forcefully initiated, especially since I speak neither Mandarin nor Korean, not to mention that generally pro players in the East are more respectful in their wording as well. But one thing I did come across is that iconic LPL jungler Tion is known for letting his opposition know his thoughts, something that would be the case in this unanticipated interaction with APA as the two players faced off in 2024's MSI. While APA obviously gets hard countered by international tournaments' inherent language barriers, he still gives it his best shot, and to kick off Team Liquid's first game in their opening series against Top Esports, he wasn't happy about 3 of his champs being taken away in his first series of bans, letting his late opponent Cream know that as they headed into the game. After some pregame typing to Cream that he looked nervous and questioning the 3 bans against his mid pool to kick off his barrage of trash talk, Tien stepped in to defend his mid laner in simply replying with "shut up," muting APA for the remainder of the game and working alongside Cream to absolutely embarrass the NA first seed in Game 1. But to add even more insult to injury, APA's trash talk really only began to look worse and worse, as after Game 2 being a massive stomp with a 16,000 gold deficit in just 22 minutes, this Team Liquid lineup would be humiliatingly humbled in a 3-0 sweep, and when asked about the situation in his post-game interview, Tien stated that he was focused on winning the actual game as opposed to the chatting game, something that he would not only do in this first round of MSI, but also 5 years prior in where else but Worlds Finals. With Worlds 2019 taking place in Europe, the home region of the year's earlier MSI winners in G2 esports, understandably the euphoria was reaching all-time highs, as this lineup served as the long-lost beacon of light that the West had spent years dreaming of, using their quirkiness and confidence to steamroll anyone who stood in their path. And though their ADC Perks has had his fair share of trash talk in the past, when it came to making light of their opponents, no one was more confident in doing so than their top laner Wonder, who had pretty much been doing so all year. You see, after this G2 roster managed to once again defeat Faker and SKT in the semifinals, this time with a 3-1 scoreline, the hope of Europe were considered by many to be the favorites headed into Worlds Finals, facing off against a reignited FPX. So when the team was asked as to how they felt going into this series, much to the chagrin of the rest of his team, Wonder wasted no time in explaining exactly how he felt.
But I can say for sure that today was the real final, and they will get a reality check next week. FPX will get the biggest reality check next week because they think we are bad, but our wrath will be swift.
Now, while a G2 win was predicted by many, including the analyst desk who had actually unanimously decided as such shortly before the series, Wonder had promised to extinguish the FPX flame entirely in a sweeping victory, and while the series was indeed a 3-0 sweep, it unfortunately wouldn't end up going in his favor. But despite Wonder and G2 being known for their history of banter, even if sometimes it's led to their own detriment, if you want to look at the real king of trash talk, you needn't look any further than LCS LCS legend Doublelift, who has built his brand off of never shying away from calling out his opposition. While like APA, there are many instances in which Doublelift's smack talk has placed him in sticky situations due to the sheer amount of frequency which he has done it throughout his career. Rewinding back to one of the earliest examples of Doublelift's death by words, let's turn the clock back to 2013, where as a young player in CLG, the ADC icon had some pretty cutting words headed into their upcoming matchup against newly added LCS team, Velocity. After qualifying for the LCS following the league's inaugural spring split, Velocity Esports went from summer promotion into facing off against CLG for their first game of the split, and when asked about his thoughts on the team, particularly their ADC Maple Street, Doublelift had some choice words to describe this up-and-coming roster.
They're pretty much a bunch of no-names. I don't really respect them. We're going to take it obviously very seriously, just like we take every match. I just think they're by far the worst team in LCS.
Now, it's one thing to talk down a roster or call them trash or whatever, as we've seen Doublelift do many times before, but to say you just don't have any respect for your opponent is a cardinal sin in practically any sporting scene. However, while one may imagine that this would rattle this inexperienced Velocity lineup, especially their bot laners of Maple Street and Evaniscus, the team actually played pretty well to kick off the game, securing the game's first 2 kills in the top lane before their bot lane racked up a pair of kills on their own in the isolated 2v2, which was something I don't imagine Doublelift was too happy about. And as for the rest of the game, Velocity managed to confidently rid of the rest of CLG, with their bot lane performing well and their trash-talking opposition doing less than ideal. Oh, and funnily enough, Velocity did actually end up being the worst team in the league by a pretty good margin with a 5-23 record at the end of the season. However, in these 5 wins, they managed to take down CLG twice, so take that as you will. But as you may have expected, this classic Doublelift incident of Flame holds a mere candle in comparison to the most infamous instance of trash talk gone wrong that League has ever seen. While, as we covered earlier, disrespecting Deft was already far enough of a reach in the case of Supa, during Worlds 2016, Cloud9's mid laner Jensen punched high above his weight class in calling out who else but the game's undisputed GOAT, Faker. In being drawn to the same group as the reigning MSI and world champions, this third-seeded Cloud9 roster would have the chance to take on the LCK Titans twice throughout the course of this initial stage. But despite being around the 3rd or maybe 4th best mid laner in the LCS at the time, Jensen tweeted 5 of the most infamous words in the esports competitive history: "Can't wait to clap Faker." Now, I'm not sure if Faker was aware of this message's existence or not, but what I do know is that after a failed gank by Cloud9, it was SKT's turn, and after Jensen was essentially knocked out of his lane, it only got much worse from there.
And potentially getting zoned off his own target.
This is
not even
gross from Faker, just completely shutting out Jensen.
Down C9 before they fight here. Jensen finally flashes!
It's too late, he flashed the stun, but the ulti still killed him.
Feel free to drop a comment of any additional instances of trash talk going wrong, and I might make a part 2. We'll see how this video does, but yeah, hope you enjoyed this video, and consider checking out the Broken Blade documentary, which I just posted, which is a pretty long one, but if you like Simply Spam content, I mean, you can check it out. But that being said, hope you have a great rest of your day or night. As always, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Later!